Classes in session.
And welcome to Unlearn 16 Classes in Session. Now, today you just get me. You just get me. But what I'm going to do, I think, it's the idea that actually was handed to me, is recap the school year. I am just now ending the 2021-2022 school year. My gosh. And it's been a significant incline, a few detours here and there. And I thought recapping some of my most memorable moments, student stories, anything you guys want to sort of know about and you've asked me about, I'm going to do it right here. So, for those who don't know me, welcome. You have 40 episodes to catch up on. Where the hell have you been? I'm a teacher. I teach grades 7 to 12. I teach things like history, society, politics, things like that. Let me recap what's gone on in this last year. Listen, COVID's been hard, guys. It's been a situation, right? Everybody's had a hard time with it. Teachers and students alike. And I think it's really changed a lot of the dynamic in school, in the classroom, and a lot of social dynamic. And we're just starting to see things, I think, turn around right now. So let's start at the beginning. Last semester, we all come in fully masked. I can't even say the word anymore. It's like gone from my head. Fully covered, spraying everything, wiping everything down, different lunch times. Nobody can eat together. I'm eating in my car. I'm eating in my classroom, doors shut, spraying every 5 seconds, trying to make sure that nobody gets the next variant that's on the table, right? But as that's going on, you can see the kids are A, incredibly happy to be back at school, but B, very tentative. So it starts to play out a little bit in their coursework. And what I see having the biggest effect is, well, two things. Number one, their ability or their choice to socialize has kind of evaporated. So you see them at lunch when they're allowed to be, wherever they're allowed to be, either eating. The only time they're allowed their mask off is when they're eating. But anytime they're anywhere else in the school, the mask's on and they have their phone in front of them. And so right away, Ryan and I, Wayne, who's the owner, Ryan and Deb and I have noticed like this is not good. All these kids are going to class, doing their thing, but they're not having any fun. They're not socializing, they're not interacting. And after a while, a lot of people talk about mental health, and yet 100% that's a thing. But what happens with school is that if you don't get some joy, if you don't find ways to get joy out of school, the school part tends to get a lot harder. And the math classroom and the history classroom, as joyous as I try to make it, starts to get so tedious that fixating on that for the entire year with no joy, with nothing fun. I'll give you examples of some stuff we do with nothing fun. The kids start to lose the ability to focus, and then that's when their education obviously takes a hit. Having a good time and socializing is an integral part to all of us, to everybody. The idea that we could all do this online, we could do it online, we had to, but now we're sort of fighting fear because a lot of kids are still very afraid of getting COVID. And so they don't want that interaction and they're wearing their mask and everything like that. And a lot of things are very limited. We still don't do gym. We still don't do extracurriculars like that. Everything is on a hold. And we start trying to figure out how can we bring back the joy? How can we bring back the fun? So at Metro, we start doing things like trivia days. And I mean trivia days, like, and we do this school-wide competition where there's prizes and everything. And so kids get very, very competitive, very, very funny. We do fun things, right? We do fun things like trivia about the teachers, random things. What's Joe's favorite movie? Where's Dominic from? What's Ryan's favorite song? Everybody knows it's U2. It's really boring and monotonous, but nonetheless. And we do these things and then the kids start to engage, and you start to see that happen a little bit more. Now, I had the luxury, I don't know, luxury might be the wrong word. I had the joy of teaching the grade 7 and 8s. And in grade 7 and 8, we created a course called Global Issues. And that Global Issues course kind of traverses a lot of different aspects of, um, well, pop culture, of social media, of politics, of history, of religion, of culture, of the environment. And it kind of pulls on all of these things because what I wanted more than anything else is to get my young kids, all right, involved, invested in things that they're passionate about. And grade seven and eights are passionate about everything. So they jump right into that and they love that, right? So you can kind of see the conversations. I made those classes a lot less about sit down and memorize. In fact, I threw it all out the window. And I threw it all out the window because I had to. Two reasons. Number one, they needed something else. They needed something else other than to be told and taught how to sit down, be quiet, write an essay, and memorize. All those things are necessary at other points, but they needed something more. They needed to have an opinion. They needed to feel engaged. They needed to understand that in this class, even if it's just one, that they're going to come, they're going to learn, they're going to have a conversation, they're going to get an opinion, they're going to write it down, they're going to do the work because there's still a lot of work, but they're going to do the work and they're going to see themselves grow and they're going to see their academics grow and they're going to understand what having that opinion is really about. And I think if I could have done that more with other classes, it would have been better. And as the year progressed and these like seven and eights really did sort of take charge of a lot of things, I started trying doing it with the other kids. The older kids were harder. The older kids were more shut down. The older kids didn't want to come as much. The older kids had other responsibilities. And it was interesting because everything kind of changed in that first semester. Now, in that first semester, I'm also going to say something because the second semester gets fun. But that first semester, my vice principal started trying to see if he could produce and put on the play Sweat by Lynn Nottage. Now, in November, he starts casting and the kids are into it and they all want to do it, but they're all still wearing masks and we're all having to isolate and we're all of that is still very much going on. But nonetheless, he's like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And if things change, amazing, right? If things change where we can actually put on the play and we're allowed to take off our masks, amazing. If it goes the other way, that's okay too. So we kind of took a gamble. He kind of took a gamble on that. And he really got kids tuned in. And again, this is what makes the difference in kids' lives. It's not, listen, I think school is incredibly important. I think education is incredibly important. But if you don't find a way to get to their heart and their soul, you're not going to get anywhere else. So he starts doing this. Now, I'm not a part of it at this point. Listen, guys, I've been teaching there for 20 years. For 20 years, Ryan Seeley has been trying to get me to be a part of a play production the entire time. And every time I say, go away. I'll do everything else. I do publicity, I do the posters, I do photos, I do video, whatever. I don't want anything to do with the play. I'm not an actor. That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. But this year was different. This year we've all been through something pretty big. And for the last few years. And this year I said to myself, come September, when things arise, TikTok's been a great thing for me, right? This podcast. I now have started speaking engagements at companies and for different schools and things like that. Everything has kind of adjusted. So I've started saying to myself, when something arises, as long as it's something I that is good for me, no matter how scared I am, no matter how tentative, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. And if it goes to crap, okay. So that's a mentality. And I said that out loud. And guys, I swear to God, by saying it out loud, I feel as though I summoned what was about to happen to me. Because heaven help me, it all changed come second semester. Now, come second semester, here's what also happens to me. I have the joy, and I use that so sarcastically, of teaching grade 7 and 8 gym. Listen, guys, grade 7 and 8 gym, for gym teachers out there, heaven help you. God bless. I have nothing but admiration and respect. I didn't want to teach it. My grade seven and eights knew I didn't want to teach it. They knew I had to teach it. They didn't understand why I didn't want to teach it because gym is their favorite subject. So when we started, we still couldn't do gym just yet. So how did I have to start with these grade seven and eights? Well, I started with health because we had to do a lot of health. So we had X amount of weeks of health, and I just packed it all in the beginning in hopes of we could take our masks off eventually, and even if we couldn't take our masks off inside, depending on which way that went, we'd be able to go outside. So at the beginning, here we jump into health. But guys, this is what changes everything. When you're forced to do crap you don't want to do, and all of a sudden you're met with a group of students, these little 12 and 13-year-old kids who have such joy and passion and even they were so excited to eventually get to gym, they were even excited about health. And I broke up health into like food nutrition stuff, but not boring food nutrition. Like we watched Food Inc. I don't know if you guys have seen Food Inc., but it's super important. We talked about big things in that section, right? Because I'm not going to sit down with the food chart. No, I'm not that teacher, guys. If you thought I was going to be that teacher, you have not been paying attention. We watch Food Inc. and we talk about healthy food, what healthy food means, manufactured food. All of my kids know what the number one drug is, and it ain't marijuana. They all will tell you flat out it is refined sugar. And we've had these big conversations about Food Inc. I had them looking up the good and the bad points of the movie. I had them fact checking this documentary. And they loved it. They were in. They were all in. They were asking me to pause the movie so that they could write down notes and understand what's a GMO or understand who Monsanto is or whatever. And I'm getting all of that amazing feedback, right? We did mental health. They loved it. Listen, grade seven and eights know mental health. They know what they need. Adults tend to get in their way and tell them what they need, but grade seven and eights pretty much know. And they're pretty articulate about what they need. In fact, it was the grade seven and eights and that age bracket that first said to me and educated me and said, Joanna, shouldn't we really do something where we get to know whatever everybody's gender pronoun, what they prefer, what their identity is? And I said, sure, I'm sure they'll tell us. And these kids said, no, but we should make it everybody tells us so nobody feels excluded and nobody feels as though they are the only ones that are going to do it because they have something different to say than maybe what you'd expect. I said, absolutely. So what did I do? Well, first day of that semester, we started filling out cards and I started asking kids a bunch of questions that included. And then what did my grade seven and eights and I have? This big discussion about mental health and identity and what that means and what does that lead into? Well, led into sex ed. Some of the funniest stories that you'll ever see happened in that class surrounding sex ed. And guys, they were attentive. A couple of funny stories if you see these TikToks before, because the kids are hilarious. A couple of funny stories where we will explain, obviously we explain what a period is. Now, I do my health class and my sexual education class, boys and girls, right? Boys, girls, he, him, theys, she, it doesn't matter. You're all together. Want to know why you're all together? Because it matters to all of us. So we all need to be educated. So one of the first things we started talking about puberty. And here's where it gets funny. I say to them, what's puberty? And somebody puts up their hand. They say, oh, well, when your body changes. I'm like, okay, that's pretty general. You're going to have to be more specific. And they get a little shifty, right? Because this is the part of this is they're going to feel uncomfortable. My job is to make them feel comfortable enough to talk about the things that they need to talk about and ask the questions they need to ask. That is the number one job of all educators. And when you say stupid crap like in Florida, they're not allowed to talk about gender or sexuality or whatever in elementary school, I'm like, you're ridiculous. You're absolutely asinine because those are the places where kids feel absolutely comfortable. They feel absolutely comfortable to talk about body parts. It's just natural to them. It's natural to them. To us, it's somehow sexualized. To them, it's just a body part. We put that on them. How dare we? How dare we get in the way of their healthy education? Anyways, grade 7 and 8 up here works different. In fact, Doug Ford, if you're listening, I don't follow your 1998 healthcare curriculum. I follow Kathleen Wynn's. You want to come at me? By all means. Um, because you're ridiculous. And to think that we would go back to 1998 when our levels of education and awareness were so pathetically backwards and stunted. I will never. So these grade seven and eights, by the way, educating me, right? We start talking about puberty and yada, yada, yada. The kids are like, okay, well, you develop, your body develops. I said, great. What happens? Well, you get hair in places. Absolutely, you get hair. And then we start talking about just development in general. I go, well, how else do you develop? And when the kid puts up his hand kind of sheepishly, he's like, you develop. And he points to his front and his butt, kind of. He goes, like in the front and the back. Well, the class laughed for a solid 20 minutes. Front and back development to the point where they all wanted, because we talked about getting school like sweatshirts, but they all wanted personalized sweatshirts. That because I gave them all nicknames, by the way. I gave them all personalized nicknames. Each one has a hysterical sort of background story. They wanted me to chirp them a little bit, and their sweatshirt said front on the front, and then on the back it said and back, and underneath it was their nickname. It was their best thing that they've ever had. They all thought it was just perfect, right? And they're walking around with a shirt that says front and back on it. Anyway, so we're howling and laughing, and then we go through what puberty means, and we go through all of those different things, and eventually we end up talking about how a baby is made, where a baby is made, what's in a uterus, where the egg comes from, where the sperm comes from. And they ask a lot of very serious questions, right? And I answer them to the best. Some of the time in my head, I'm blushing a little bit. But all these kids want to know are genuine, simplistic answers to their question. They don't want my bullcrap, whatever, nervousness or sheepish. They don't want that. And in fact, the more that I do that, and if I express that, the less they learn, right? The less they learn because they're now going to feel uncomfortable because I'm uncomfortable. Number one job of a teacher, don't be uncomfortable. Work through it. Work through it out of a classroom. Don't bring your crap and put it on those kids. Anyways, so we're going through it all. We're talking about period. Second hilarious story. What's a period, right? And so the girls that were in this class, they already had their period, so they knew and they didn't care. And they're just like, it's so annoying. And they were just kind of being talking like that. But the boys didn't know. Most of the boys didn't know. In fact, one of the boys, before we even talk about this, one of the boys put up his hand in because one of my rules was in grade seven and eight, you guys got to get up in the morning and shower. You got to start using deodorant all the time. And when we start gym class, you're going to put it on at the beginning of gym class and at the end of gym class every day. It'll smell good. Why? Because puberty makes us smell not so good. We get all these hormones and we sweat and we smell. So we're going to make ourselves smell good. And hygiene is super important. And this one little boy puts up his hand. He said, Joanna, I brought deodorant today. I said, that's amazing. Is it a good smelling one? He's like, it's so good. I tried like 7 of them and I got this one. And he goes, do you know, I went home and I told my mom about puberty and she already knew about it. I said, really? That's amazing. And he's like, I was upset with her because she didn't tell me about puberty. And then she said, yeah, Joanna's 100% right. And we went out and got all this stuff. Anyway, I love it when somehow I know more than their parents do. Anyways, so we start going through gym class and we get to the period stuff. Well, guys, the boys were silent. They're like, what happens with the bleeding and they are just beside themselves, right? And at some point, a guy puts up his hand at the back of the room, but he wasn't paying attention so much. He puts up his hand and he goes, so how long do they bleed for? And I said, I don't know. I said, it depends on the girl, right? I said, but on an average, let's say 4 to 7 days. Well, the boys lost their ever loving 5 to 7 days. They screamed. They were irate. One of them wanted to know, how does the girl not die in that process? Because that's just in their head. It's just so much. Another guy's like apologizing to the girls. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. How do you go through this? Why do you have to come to school? Guys, never have you seen more empathy from young boys for girls going through their period than when they discovered what the heck it was. But anyways, we worked through all of that, right? So we worked through all of this. We talked about sexuality. We talked about gender identities. We talked about the way television portrays things. We talked about that kind of mental health and how it informs sexuality, how it informs identity, all of this stuff, which was amazing. And at this point, you can see my grade 12s starting to come out of their shell a little bit more. Again, it was hard with them. And I'll tell you how I really pulled them out because I had to change the way that I taught this semester. So eventually, these kids get into the gym and we start playing dodgeball and basketball and soccer and baseball and more dodgeball and more dodgeball. And then I tell them, guys, I'm going to do fitness testing with you. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Canada fitness testing up here, but it was god awful and everybody hated it. I kind of liked it because I usually got whatever, gold, whatever the highest was, when you got this little badge, right? And I explained that to the kids. I said, when I was a kid, this is what we did. And they said, well, can we do that? I'm like, I'm sorry. You want to do Canada fitness testing? They're like, yeah. So, guys, I came up with 8 different Canada fitness, like, you know, comparable Canada fitness tests. And I told them at the beginning, as long as they completed it, they'd each get a badge. And I sent away for all of these crazy, like, sports badges. I got like 150 of them so they could all pick which one they wanted. And I said, as long as you keep every week, whoever does the best, they'll get a badge. And then if you better your scores, you'll get badges. So it was all about getting these badges. They were beside themselves. They're like, can we do some more wall sits? I'm like, you psychopaths. One kid, we had to stop him at 150 sit-ups. I'm like, I don't know where this energy is coming from, but I'm pretty sure you've broken something. So we're going to have to pause you. This is it. You hit the cap, right? I tried to introduce harder exercises because they were so bent on competing with each other, sure, but really then bettering themselves. And again, I look to the grade 7 and 8s, and I'm thankful that I got stuck with them. And I tell them that all the time because they have a different way of looking at life, right? They've left pretense hasn't really infiltrated them yet. It kind of happens at the end of grade 8, but it hasn't really, they want to have a good time. They want to compete. They want to try their hardest. They want to sweat. They want to get better than they were yesterday. And they want to know that I know they're getting better. And again, it was very refreshing for me as a teacher, especially when I was dealing with my grade 12s. My grade 12s were dealing with a lot of mental health stuff, I felt like, a lot of internalized stuff. They were very quiet. And I looked at them and I thought, I need they have a big ISP, okay? So they're fine in discussions and stuff like that, or they still weren't as engaged as I would like them to be, but I'm really trying. And their big project was coming around, and usually their big project something very independent. And I looked at my 2 classes this year and I went, we can't do that. We can't do something else that's independent, right? Because if I do more things that are independent where they're quiet, they sit in front of their computer, I mean, their heads are going to explode or something's going to drip out of their ears. So I thought, what do I do with these kids that is different? Now, it's around this time. I'm going to circle back. March. That Ryan comes to me and says, Joanna, we have a problem. And I said, what? Well, a couple of the kids, due to a couple different reasons. One of them had to actually moved. His family moved, so he couldn't be in the play anymore. So we had to find a replacement. And then the girl that was playing Tracy in the movie, in the play Sweat, there was actually two different people that were involved in this, and both couldn't continue. Predominantly for like they couldn't focus, their mental health wasn't there, like everything was so overwhelming, right? And this was just another thing they couldn't do. And he's like, we're gonna have to cancel, like there's no way. And the kids are really upset about it, and they just want to, can we just do another play? And he's like, no, we can't just start another play. It's way too much that we need to. So the kids that were in it were already super, and there'd been a couple of changes that we've had to make to that play. And Ryan looks at me and he goes, listen, I'm going to ask you because I think you could do this. But if you don't, it's okay, but we can't do the play. So I'm like, oh, Jesus. Okay, fine. He's like, I need you to play Tracy. Now, remember what I said at the beginning of the year, guys. I said, I am going to be all in. I'm going to do things that scare me. And just so everybody's aware, nothing on this earth, maybe singing, because I'm bad. If I was good, I'd sing all the time. Nothing on this earth scares me more than acting. It terrifies me to my core. As soon as he asked me, I started to sweat, quite literally. I said I was going to say yes. So without even thinking, I said, yep, I'm in. Now, He's like, look, read the play. Take the play home. Go read it. Take a minute. Decide. I said, Ryan, I'm in. I'm not going to let these kids down. I'm in. Now, two things. Number one, I thought Ryan may have given me a heads up on the kind of play it was, but he said I would really love it because it's very political. Number two, Tracy might be the second most lines of the play. So I wasn't jumping into like one or two scenes or just this tertiary character. Guys, heaven help me. I was in all of it, all the time, with monologues and big speech. So I took this play home and I read it, but I didn't really read it because I didn't want to read the whole play. I just came back. I said, Ryan, I'm in. He's like, amazing. Tell the kids we'll start. But he's like, because I can't count on anybody else to catch up. They've been doing this since November. This is March. I need to catch up, learn everything. We're going to perform in June. Last week of May, first week of June. Fine. I'm in. So guys, I do a couple scenes, practice. I'm like, okay, this is terrifying, but okay. And I take it home and I highlight. I get my own version of the play, my own copy. I take my blue highlighter and I highlight all of my scenes and my lines. I go through act one, scene one, highlight. I'm like, wow, that's a lot. Oh, sorry, not scene one. Scene two. Wow, that's a lot. Scene three. Wow. Guys, it would have been quicker for me to highlight everybody else's lines. And I bring that book back on Monday, show Ryan, I go, the whole play's highlighted, Ryan. And he's like, you're going to be great. Don't worry. You're going to be great. I'm like, how am I supposed to do this and be a teacher? He's like, you just have to trust me. You are Tracy. You're going to be great. It's just memorizing. I go, I don't know when's the last time I memorized this much stuff. So that's in my head now, right? Now, I have a pretty good ability to compartmentalize and to kind of like put things back away until I really have to deal with it. So in the beginning, I wasn't too stressed. I just go to play. I'd like say the lines. I'd read them out of the book. I wasn't really concerned about memorizing anything. That's going to come later. And that's going to come in a wave of panic. But at the same time, I'm trying to get my classes engaged, right? And so I'm doing this incredibly creative thing, a thing that I'm terrified of. And I'm like, I need something to get these kids in. I need them in the class. I need them in their head. I need them in their bodies. I need them to stop being so isolated. And at this point, all the mask mandates kind of go away and everything changes, right? Everything changes. And I say, guys, here's what we're going to do. So I teach a society and a world history. And I say, for society class, and go check out my TikTok, you can see the actual final product. But for my society class, I say this. We are going to recreate the very famous Norman Rockwell painting of Ruby Bridges walking into that school, the very first school that was desegregated, pillared by two state marshals on either side of her, federal marshals walking her in there, right? And I have the painting, and I have this way of doing it in which I sort of take the painting and I sort of change it a little bit on my computer, and then I create a stencil and I project it, and I kind of draw out all of the images, and I say to the kids, here's what we're going to do. We are going to recreate this using multimedia that represent that civil rights struggle, civil rights of today, and civil rights of all stripes, whether they be African American, whether they be Indigenous, whether they be women, whether they be about the LGBTQ community, whether they be about disability rights, whatever rights you can pull in, right? You want to talk about autism research? Great, pull that in, that little puzzle piece. I want physical examples. So kids, I said, this is your job for society. Go find the stuff, bring it in, and we're going to do it as a class. We're going to paint the background, and then we're going to fill in these items. So kids started going away and bringing stuff back. They brought stuff back like The Handmaid's Tale, which is crazy. And we used pieces and cutouts of that book in order to talk about Roe v. Wade in order to talk about women's rights and reproductive freedoms. And kids brought in pride symbols like little pride flags, and they brought in newspaper clippings about pride, and they brought in they created an Every Child Matters banner out of orange for the marshal to wear on his arm in place of the marshal thing he normally wore. And they found clips out of Brown versus Board of Ed decision desegregating everybody, and then they cut that out and printed it and stuck it on the books that Ruby Bridges was carrying. And then they found cotton pieces, like just cotton batten that they created to use for Ruby Bridges' hair, and then they spray painted it. And they used flowers to fill the legs of two of the marshals, real flowers. And then we podged them all on, filling it from the bottom up, talking about growth and rebirth and rising above and everything that comes after all of the pain and suffering and all of those things. The kids were amazing. Now, here's the funny part. They brought it all in, and then they kind of stood there and went, I don't want to glue anything. I don't want to do anything permanent. And this is an interesting part. I had to really force them into it. I said, what are you worried about? We're worried it's going to look bad. Okay. But if we're just going to stand around here and not do anything, it's going to just be nothing. So risk it looking bad. So they tried stuff. And some of the stuff didn't work. I said, I don't think that's working. They're like, yeah, it looks bad. I said, great, rip it off. They're like, what? Rip it off. Well, it will take away the paint. We'll repaint. And what this did outside of and then we got to talk about all these social justice issues, which is exactly what my class and that project was talking about. Sort of beside that, what it also did is it allowed kids to not be good at something. None of them were art kids. They didn't need to be good at something, but they needed to do it anyways. And if it didn't work, they took it off, they ripped it off, and we did it again. And we did it again. Right? And we fixed it. And then some of the things that were mistakes, they're like, but I like that mistake, right? One of the kids had this amazing idea. He brought in a light bulb because a light bulb was this idea of an idea. And I said, well, I don't think we can attach a light bulb. He goes, but what if we crush it? What if we crush it? Because it was about crushing people's ideas. I'm like, oh my God. And so we painted this. Now I did this part. Well, they painted it. They painted this light bulb. And then I took the light bulb outside and I crushed it. And it just shattered into a billion little tiny red pieces because we painted it red. And then what we did is we threw, I don't know if you guys know the painting, but right over Ruby Bridges' head, there's a tomato that somebody throws at her. It hits the wall and slides down. Instead of throwing a tomato there, we threw a red painted cloth, hit the thing, and it kind of slid down. But then to accentuate that, we took the crushed glass and we sprinkled it on. We podged it all on. So it's this red paint, and then sprinkled down is glass. Glass representing the crushed ideas, the crushed belief system, the crushed. And I'm like blown away by these kids, right? And so I helped them do that because I don't want anybody getting cut. So as these kids are into this, I say to my history kids, I say, you're going to do this too, because a lot of the kids were overlapped. I said, your job is this. This is an art piece. This is an art piece that needs explanation. So you're going to take 3 pieces of material. You're going to talk about if it's the flowers. You're going to talk about the cotton. You're going to talk about 3 different pieces that were brought. And you're going to give a 1-page description that we will then frame and hang beside the piece of art in the school hallway when it's all said and done. So it describes why you used it. Why'd you use the glass? What does it mean? Why did you use the cotton? How does that connect to slavery and issues of history? Why did you use the Every Child Matters? What does that connect to in history? So their job was to tie the art to meaning and to history. And they all had to be a part of that. And a lot of them, it was incredibly uncomfortable and they didn't necessarily love it, but they didn't necessarily love it because it put them on edge, right? Because we're such a class, we're such a situation of do everything you're supposed to do and do it all to this kind of time. And I kind of chucked that all for this. And I've done it before, but in much different circumstances. This was really to shake them out of what they've been forced into for the last 2 years. So go check out my my TikTok. It's on my Twitter as well. You can go check it out. Unlearn 16 tweet. I put it up there and I show the whole image. It's perfect. It's beautiful. And what I'm most impressed with is that kids did something they weren't great at. They risked sucking. And if they sucked, they figured out how to fix it. And they stepped outside that creative energy. They tried their best to step outside, like just memorize and put something down to really understand what that symbolism could mean for somebody and how art means things for people and how it pushes us to new levels at all times. And so they did all of that. And then all the while I'm doing this, guys, I am practicing and rehearsing sweat, getting closer and closer to the play date, guys. I am having levels of anxiety and nightmares and sleepless nights, and I can't eat, and I'm beside myself because I'm getting closer and closer to this date, and I'm pretending as though it's all okay, but I don't have anything on lock. Nothing. And I'm thinking I'm going to stand up here. We sold out 4 shows. What, 300 people came and saw this show. And on day 1, I'm like, this is how I die. I'm going to die of a heart attack trying to do this play. And as we're going through this, and I'm scared, you know what the kids do? Ryan, by the way, he was amazing. I never would have done it if not for Ryan. He pulled me aside every day, told me how amazing I was and what great things I did. And then he would also be like, you can try this, work on this, do this, right? But the kids were really what got me through. Want to know why? Because the kids were scared, but they saw that I was nervous and they just helped me every day. Every day they pushed me a little bit more. They said, Joe, you're going to be great. This is great. That was a great take. Look at how good this scene went. And I had these 16, 17-year-old kids propping me up, which I needed, heaven help me, but propping me up. And I realized that's what school is. That's what education is. Figuring out who needs what, how to prop each other up, how to take away something, how to do things that scare us, how to be supported while we do it. And teachers need to experience that. We as teachers tend to do things we're good at again and again and again and again and again. I've taught American history 20 times. I know it. I don't need it. I know it. But this play, this was a time for me to be young and scared again. And as adults, we don't spend enough time being young and scared, right? Because we find out what we're good at and then we just hunker down. We don't do things that terrify us. And the play went through, and it wasn't bad. Guys, I wasn't bad. I think I did a pretty good job. I think I could have memorized better, but I'm really good at ad-libbing, thank heavens. But I am so proud that we did it, and it was amazing. Like, the play itself was amazing. The whole production was amazing. We got such amazing feedback, all of these families, and we have new kids coming to the school just because they saw the play and they can't believe we did that, especially after COVID and all of this kind of stuff. And all I can think is, I did it. I knew I was scared to do it. I knew I might suck. And I sucked for a long time of that. Even if at the end I was okay. But I still did it. And as adults, the best lesson I learned this year is that as adults, we need to do things we're scared of. We need to do things we suck at, because that's how you can connect to your kids. When your kids are stressed about a test, we need to put ourselves back in that place where it was new for us, where writing an essay was new for us. We're learning about the Constitution or about the War of 1812 was new for us, or what a theory means. When those things were new and scary and they put us on edge, and we just try to muddle through the best we could. So as adults, we have to do things that scare the heck out of us, that we suck at. And I'm telling you right now, that's the way we connect to everybody. That's the way adults connect to kids, teachers to students. People can connect, right? So we can understand what that fear feels like. And most importantly, we do it anyways. We push through that fear. We push through that insecurity. We push through that whatever. And sometimes it might suck. And we need to be okay with that happening, because that's what makes us human. That's what changes us. That's what makes it better. And I'm telling you right now, that's what education is. It shouldn't be find the thing you're great at and only do that. Do that. But then find the things you're not great at that still may bring you joy or fill your heart or fill your soul. Don't throw those away because you're not good at them. Figure out how to be better. Figure out about the pieces you can take and incorporate in your life so that you're a more holistic person that understands more, that learns more, that connects more with all people. That was my year in review, guys. So I'd like to thank my grade 7 and 8s because they haven't helped me. They pushed me and pushed me and pushed me until I understood more, until I did things I didn't want to do, but understood the joy I could get from those. And thank you to my grade 12s for forcing me to change the class up because they needed. And thank you to Ryan Seeley and the whole cast of Sweat for helping me do something I was terrified of and I sucked at because it was the best lesson I have had in 20 years. Thanks for listening, guys. I will see you next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat station. Have a good night, guys. Dismissed.